This show is brought to you by Go Live TV. Download the app now.
Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Law and Reality. My name is Richard Borax. I'm an immigration lawyer here in Toronto. Now, today we're going to talk about Ontario's newest immigration rules. Earlier this month, Ontario announced under its provincial nominee program changes to the rules. And today we'll be looking at the good news and the bad news, what was announced and what was forgotten. First, let's look at what was announced and some of the good news. Can we have the first chart up, please? It's there. Now, interestingly, the first thing the Ford government did was to add some unskilled worker jobs to the list of priority jobs that the government says are needed in Ontario. The government announced nurses' aides, orderlies, patient services, home support workers, excluding housekeepers, transport truck drivers. And these jobs were added to a list that already included general farm workers, laborers, industrial workers, and installers and services. Now, what's really interesting about this, and this is good news for those people who have those skills. And God bless them if they're in that list, and people will be getting excited. Unskilled workers, truck drivers, personal care workers, they're going to see their jobs on the list and they're going to have their hope built up. That's the good news. Now, the bad news. As their hopes get built up, mostly they're going to be crashed, especially those from Italy, Portugal, Europe, other European nations, and Latin America. And the reasons they're going to crash is because the government, the Ford government in Ontario, still is putting a stress on the English language exam. And the reality is that most of my clients, people from Europe and Latin America, cannot pass the English exam, do not have the money to pass the exam, and do not have the money to qualify for this program. So the question then is, who does have the money, who will benefit? And that's the reality. So we know the new law. Now let's look at the new reality. The new reality means simply there's going to be more people coming from countries where you can either pass the language exam, the IELTS exam overseas, or you're simply engaging in an act of corruption and buy the results, which is essentially which is happening more and more in places like India, Pakistan, and other parts of Asia, because the IELTS exam is administered differently in Asia than it is in other parts of the world. And is that corruption? Well, yes, it is. So the good news is there's new jobs on the list. The bad news is people from Europe and Latin America will not be able to benefit by and large. It's another program to bring in people from Asia, essentially. Now, the next, if we put the second chart up, the second chart, the good news is that this government has made it easier for small business people to come to Canada. And it's quite interesting, quite exciting, actually. And in the GTA now, you can, if a businessman comes in from anywhere in the world and puts down $600,000 investment and has a net worth of $800,000, he'll qualify to apply for landed immigrant status. But the intriguing part is outside the GTA, it's only $200,000 investment and a net worth of $400,000. Again, the GTA goes from Oshawa to Burlington. So Hamilton is outside the GTA, London, Chatham, Brantford, North Bay, Peterborough. Those places are outside the GTA, and a $200,000 business investment will get you in the running for an immigrant visa. Now, if you're in the IT business and you have experience in the IT business, even in Toronto, $200,000 will get you into a position to apply for landed immigrant status. Again, you have to have a net worth of $400,000. Now, that's the good news. Now, for our clients, the bad news. The bad news is that most of the folks coming in from Europe up until now, and from Latin America up until now, haven't had that kind of money. But, that could change. when people scratch their heads together and they see whether you're on a small farm in Minas Gerais or someplace in Poland, they may be able to put together the money, or if they're coming from Brexit England or whatever, they can maybe come up with the money. That's the good news. $200,000 investment in Peterborough or Chatham or North Bay is not a bad deal to get a visa. The problem, again, is the English exam. And again, the English exam will be the killer for most of the folks who don't want to come in from Europe or Latin America. And again, the folks are going to either pass or buy a pass with the language exam will be from Asia. Again, I'm not criticizing our friends in India or Pakistan, but the reality is the corporation that controls the IELTS testing in Asia, they're not very, they have problems, and they have authenticity problems, and they have corruption problems. So that's why it's well known by people in Asia that if you can't pass the exam, you buy a pass. So again, that's the good news and the bad news of the Ontario announcements that were made earlier this month in the budget. Now, that's what was announced. Now let's have a little look at what was not announced. And for me, and I think for a lot of folks here in Ontario, what was not announced is more important than what was announced. And what was not announced was anything for the undocumented workers. I think it's fair to say that the Undocumented Workers Committee and a lot of people were working hard and lobbying hard with the Ontario government to recognize the benefits to Ontario of doing something and regularizing the undocumented workers. This government, Premier Ford, desperately needs money. I mean, he's killing himself with cutbacks on all sorts of things, social programs. It could cost him an election. He needs the $3 or $4 billion from taxation that he would get if he would just get common sense and realistic with the undocumented workers. But he chose not to. And I think the reason for that is because he was lobbied, although we lobbied hard and the Undocumented Committee was lobbied hard, and a lot of people lobbied hard to put that $4 billion into Premier Ford's pocket. He didn't want it because there's other people who are putting some money in their private pockets. They obviously lobbied harder, they lobbied more effectively, and they were successful at this time. But I want to assure folks that the lobbying has not stopped, it will not stop. But I think what's going to happen now is I think the lesson that was learned from this experience on behalf of undocumented workers was that we have to get right to the nub of the issue, right to the core. And rather than beating around the bushes and explaining the good news for Ontario, because it's only good news for Ontario if we do something to legalize undocumented workers. It's $3 to $4 billion is a lot of cash. But clearly, the good news couldn't sell. We were beaten, we were defeated by people who put some cash in their pockets every year, and the money they put in their pockets beat out the needs of the province of Ontario to get that $3 to $4 billion. But I can assure everybody that over the next few weeks, we're not going to wait a long time, over the next few weeks, we're going to get right to the nub of the issue, right to the core of the issue, so that the people of Ontario can make a very clear decision. Do we want to increase our tax base through the undocumented workers by giving them some visas, by $3 to $4 billion, increased tax base, or are we content to let the lobbyists who are working for a small number of individuals that put a few dollars in their pocket every year by exploiting undocumented workers? Those are now the issues, and that battle will be joined as of now. Thank you very much. Till next week.